Hi patrons, for this week, since the main YouTube video is really about not getting lost in practicing everything in scale positions and only sort of thinking of it from a technical point of view, then I thought it would be a good idea to maybe demonstrate how you practice things if you don't want to be systematic. And I'm in a pretty good mood because I just, for the first time, tested negative for COVID, so that means that I can actually go play the concert in BIM House tomorrow, which was sort of getting really close to not going ahead at all. So that's really nice. What I decided to do is, of course, now that I'm working with these scale positions and I don't want to be systematic, is that I'm just going to take a single triad and then just practicing, show you how I think about making lines with that and practice making lines with it. And I think that's a really important thing to do. And that's definitely not the kind of thing that you can do for every position or every octave or anything like that. This is really just about working on the skills that are not about knowing everything everywhere in the right way, because it is about what you can do with the material that you already know. So it's really focused on that, and it's also not the kind of thing that you want to try and learn in all positions. You just want to explore how it is, and actually in doing so, you're not going to write the next on a Lee using this material, but you are going to make some solid phrases, and you're going to practice, and you're going to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and how you can get better at making lines with it. And also, as you will see in these examples, there are things that I'm busy with right now, and they're going to come through because that's just what I'm focusing on right now. And if I was to do this in 6 months, then probably I'm going to come up with different lines as well, or at least have slightly different ideas in there. And that's really just a part of the whole process, which is really also how your playing is developing, and this is where you will really develop your playing. Let's check out the first example. So I wanted to start super simple here, of course. So I'm using the F major triad on a D minor chord, and I'm just playing it ascending. And then when I have this melody, then that's of course clearly just encircling the B so that I can get to my G7, and then playing sort of in true bebop fashion, of course, a G7 flat 9, resolving down to C major 7. And you're going to see, of course, I'm in this position and I'm around here all the time. So the ending of the phrase, there are probably going to be maybe 2 or 3 variations on this at most, because I'm going to come out on this note or this note all the time. That's also not really my focus. Like, I'm focusing on different ways of using the F major triad. So I allow myself to not be super creative with everything else all the time. It just, right, for now, the point is really just to make some lines that work. That's what I'm trying to do. Now that works. Let's check out the next one. So here I'm playing now not an ascending triad, I'm playing a descending triad. But again, it's still just really, and I'm probably going to have that in, I'm not sure, but most of the examples that I'm going to go to that B, because it's right in there. So it's kind of the obvious place to go, most natural flow in that melody. Here I'm kind of using 2 triads next to each other. I'm kind of using the F major triad and then turning that into an F diminished triad. And you're going to see that in the next example as well. And that's just sort of using voice leading to create the melodies. But then I'm making it a little bit less clear by not completely repeating that melody. So it's... So we get a different melody on the G7, even though I'm actually just playing like this and then resolving that. So there's like a chord quality to this kind of melody as well. But you can use that in a more sort of clear voice leading way, and that will sound like this. So here that's very clear, right? I'm just playing this melody with the F major triad, and then now, of course, I have a place where I can start on the A. I'm actually just going to try and start on different notes now, just to see if I can still make lines with it. That's sort of the challenge now that I played ascending and descending. So we have this melody, and then I'm just repeating that on the G7, but I'm moving the 2 top notes down, so I get that F diminished triad. And then of course that just logically is gonna resolve here on the G and the E and the C major 7. So with the previous example, then there was sort of this clear motivic aspect in there, because I was just repeating the same melody and then voice leading from one chord to the next. Here I'm also using motivic development, and what I'm doing is that I'm first playing a leading note and then playing the descending triad. And that's also how I'm constructing the melody on the G7, but now I'm doing it with like a D diminished triad, and I just add a leading note for that one, so we get. And that's just a different way of getting the melodies to make sense. I think it's really useful that you also sometimes try to do other things with the melody. So sometimes you want to play to a target note, sometimes you want to do something that's call response, and other times you want to do something that's more motivic. And of course, now you saw two examples of it being motivic. One where I'm really just voice leading it note for note, and now one where I'm shifting it, but then in that way developing the motif. And those are both useful, both things that you want to explore and that you can use if you feel like your lines are maybe always sounding the same. See if you can identify if you're missing one of these things, because that's fairly easy to work on. If you have that as a concept, then you can easily develop some new sounds in your melodies by just focusing on using that really a lot and then just doing different things with it. So here we have an example where, as I said, I'm really busy with a lot of the bebop pivot arpeggios and stuff like that. So that's of course what I'm using here on the G7. The melody that on the D-7, where I'm using the F major triad, I'm using one of the patterns that I use for triads really a lot, which is like starting on the 3rd. For a triad, that's usually very clear, and whatever chord you're using it on is also usually a good note. So in this case, it's the 5th of the chord, of course, because it's A over D minor. So then a leading note to take me to the B, because that's just really the area where we're at now. And then I'm adding that pivot arpeggio, which is just a B half diminished pivot arpeggio. And there's another pattern that is really useful for triads, which then also gives me an excuse to use another pivot arpeggio. So this melodic pattern is then starting on the 5th of the triad, which in this case is actually the 7th of the chord, of course, it's like the C. So then up the triad, and then again a leading note, and then not to play the same melody again. I'm still using a pivot arpeggio, but where I'm coming out, I think it also kind of has to do with how I'm coming out with the fingering here, that this really just falls on this pivot version of a B diminished arpeggio. So like this, and then resolving to one of the two resolutions that I ended up having on the C major 7 chord. So that's how I'm thinking about these melodies, and I think that's sort of the important thing to just go for when you're working with this. So just sit down, and I think actually it can be super useful to really write lines out once in a while also, just to see what you're coming up with, and then like it doesn't have to be brilliant, it just has to work, and then you can sort of move on and then just try and write more. And I think it is as much about sort of forcing yourself to figure out like, okay, can I actually get this to work? How do I write a line with this? And if I'm starting with different patterns here, sometimes you won't get it in one go, but then it really pays off to just go, well, there must be a solution that works. And I think that's definitely something that's worth training, because it's just going to help you sort of hearing the right solution and finding more material and sort of getting, not playing yourself or your own solo lines into sort of a dead end where you can't really get out of it musically. So I think that's something that's definitely worth checking out. I spent a fair amount of time doing this just to get new things into my playing. If I transcribe something, then it's reduced to something really small, and then I will mess around with it like I'm messing around with this F major triad. Or I'll take something like an F major triad and then just see what I can do with it, or try to sort of challenge myself while I'm trying to develop new lines, and in that way, new vocabulary. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask here on Patreon, of course. For the rest, thank you for your support, and until next week.